Welcome to our series on monitoring hormone therapy, where we're going to help you try to navigate through the sometimes very difficult question of which test is best, a blood test, a saliva test, a urine test, or maybe nothing at all for a given situation with hormone therapy, given a particular hormone and a specific route of administration. So we're going to be asking, how do we know what type of test to use for different HRT situations? And in this instance, we're going to be talking about vaginal hormones and also transmucosal hormones. For example, a male taking testosterone or DHEA by applying it to the rectal mucosa. We find with these types of administration is the absorption is actually quite good, but one distinction that we need to make before getting started is these are not the same as transdermal. So when you take a cream with a hormone in it and you put it on your skin, that's going to be a totally different picture in terms of absorption and in terms of what the laboratory tests are going to show than if you're dealing with a mucosal membrane. So usually the absorption from a mucosal membrane is very good. So we've got a number of variables that we've got to deal with in terms of trying to interpret laboratory results. We've got potentially different hormones, so you could be taking an estrogen product, testosterone, maybe DHEA, progesterone. You've got different types of delivery in terms of the size, so it could be a small, very concentrated delivery or a larger amount of a cream with a lower concentration. So obviously the concentration then is another variable. The type of base that it's in, that's going to change the picture a little bit. So we've got some timing issues in terms of when those values are actually going to go up and then back down. And obviously there's always a difference between one person and another. So let me highlight this by looking at testosterone application. So here we've taken all those variables away except for one. We're just looking at two different people on the same exact vaginal testosterone product. And what you can see with the blood levels is if, for example, you test at 8 hours, you can see that this person's levels have already returned to baseline. So they came up, they peaked higher actually than the other individual, but then returned to baseline at 8 hours, whereas the first person is actually peaking at 8 hours, has a little bit more of a gentle up and down. So what we find is if you're testing at a particular time, it's not exactly and always indicative of what's gone on over the entire period in terms of exposure to a hormone. So if we move now from this testosterone situation to a progesterone situation, you can see that at 8 hours with this product, normally people will be hitting their peak. They didn't measure samples between 6 and 24 hours, but we can see that the peak is somewhere in between there, and note that at 24 hours yet, we don't have a baseline value. So as we're looking at different situations, you're going to get different timings in terms of the peaks or the troughs. So it's difficult to predict with serum and saliva testing when you're just testing one moment in time. It's difficult to predict when the levels should be measured. So urine hormones would provide a solution to this in that it reduces the timing problem because you can collect hormones over a large period of time and catch the peaks and the troughs. The problem being with vaginal hormones, testosterone and estrogen from the actual hormone product can contaminate the urine. And this is where we've come up with a solution. If we look at testosterone, it's got to be conjugated to be excreted in urine. So free testosterone doesn't really end up in urine much at all. Your body is going to add a water-soluble constituent onto there, usually a glucuronide, which is sort of like a sugar, or a sulfate group, and so that compound then becomes highly water soluble, and that's what's excreted into the urine. So urine is going to typically contain just 2% free hormone and predominantly these conjugates, and that's what we're measuring. So the conjugates then are converted back to free testosterone in the lab procedure, and that's what we measure. So when you look at a situation with vaginal hormones, you're essentially adding into the mix some of the hormone from the supplementation that didn't actually get into circulation, and you're adding that in as what? As free hormone. So if then in our method we can remove the free hormone prior to testing, we'll also be removing that negligible amount of free hormone that already existed in the urine, but that doesn't actually change the value. And so now we're able to measure what's in the urine from the systemic exposure and not from contamination. And so we're able to fix that problem with urine testing. So the fact that it doesn't work for vaginal hormones, we can overcome with better lab procedures. Some of the other issues of urine hormone testing is that the 24-hour collection, not only do people typically not enjoy the process very much, but we find that a high number of people collect in error, whether it's not collecting the entire 24 hours or other issues. And then the other problem there too is that you've got a patient making your first lab measurement, so they have to tell you the total volume, and of course that value is going to directly affect the results, and that can be also problematic. So the way that we do our testing is a little bit different. We're collecting 4 spot urine samples, so it's a very easy collection. It represents more than half of the day, so again, you're averaging out these peaks and troughs. You get more clinical information in terms of metabolites and things of this sort that you would typically not get with a blood or saliva test, and then, which doesn't have anything to do with vaginal hormones, but we're also improving the adrenal profile from a urine test by adding the diurnal-free cortisol pattern plus the metabolism, so it's a more comprehensive look, but it's very easy for the patient to do. And for vaginal hormones, because of the special method that we use, it's able to become a tool where urine testing typically is not. And so if you'd like more information on our testing, or you'd like to contribute to this conversation, feel free to send us an email at info@precisionhormones.com.